Hi, everybody. Just want to thank everybody for, those who sent in some questions. I appreciate it. And I'll use a few tonight, hopefully, and at the same time, use some of them on Saturday. This is a question from Chris McLaughlin. Before I start that, I just hope everybody is okay and keeping as safe as possible. It's so easy to let go of let's say, some of the protocols, especially when um, flagging in the distance, there's the vaccine that might be really helpful. So just keep in mind that, you know, uh, it helps just to be careful. Uh, this is a question from Chris McLaughlin, and she's been reading a book by Jacob Needleman, uh, and he's talking about the structure of mind when he's discussing Kant and Hume. This is philosophical, of course, and before I talk about this, various numbers of books written by people who have, let's say, their Sephiroth or chakras functioning in a certain particular way, have an effect on those of us who are, let's say, beginning to perceive these centers that exist and perceive some of the energy that they have within them. The reason why they can perceive it actually is that the energy is there for the purpose of being helpful to people who read these books. It's a dilemma. We have all kinds of things going on in ourselves as a personality. And if we have about 50 people reading the same book, there'll be those who can actually perceive, and those who are learning how to perceive, and those who are sure they're perceiving or not sure they're perceiving. This whole process of perception is, and I'm trying to be guarded here, so I apologize to anybody if I'm making them feel like as if they're uncomfortable. But truth is that the ability to perceive happens when a person is trying to pull back from being an important perceiver. And those of you who have started to perceive somewhat realize that the first thing that happens is you have a reflex inside of you, which is very important in many, many instances, to assess what you're perceiving as relating to some biases that you might have as a personality. That is true of everybody, by the way. So there's no one who's exempt from this. Chris has begun perceiving, and she's asking these questions that are very valuable for anyone who is thinking that they are able to perceive or want to perceive these energies coming through these chakras that are relatively functional. For us, when we're engaging with these things, our perceptions are such that they, as I said before, are assessed by our personality and what they are like and what they're not like. Everyone will perceive energies better that are closer to the actual engagement with root gonad and solar plexus structures. And this is valuable. This is really important, but it's only a beginning. Out of these root gonad and solar plexus structures comes energy moving upward to stimulate the brow center, the throat center, the heart center, in a way that is relative to the individual personality. So we have a unknown to us or known to us. We have a legitimate bias, each one perhaps different, about how much energy they are perceiving and why. This is natural and this is normal, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's valid. Let me explain that. What it means is that you're able to perceive initially, and initially means anywhere for 100 years or a couple of 100 lives or 2 lives or 1 life or whatever, because it's really part of a process related to growing. And this is really very difficult for us to understand. So if you are perceiving energy, if you have a good strong root center, a good strong gonad and solar plexus center, which you are working on so that you can move towards a more balanced personality, then, and I didn't say perfect personality, not even valuable in this idea of engagement with higher states. Oh, I know what I just said there. Because the reason why I said it is there's no perfect personality. There are personalities that act as if they're engaging in a particular way so that they can be considered this kind or that kind of a person, more spiritual, more valuable, more intelligent, more this, more that, more that. And this is a mechanism that we have here on these planes. And I'll just say this because there is another question that Gene Irving had about trying to understand the relationship that you have with perceiving inside, observing inside. And I know I said this before, but when you're observing inside, you're looking at a movie. How you perceive that movie is related to a bias. There is no negation in it. There's no perfection in it. There's a value related to us, the perceiver. And we maintain that very important value because it is a summation of images that we have within our purview, our personality purviews, ways of engaging with life, and acknowledging and not acknowledging what we think is valuable or not valuable. And what we're doing then is we're so-called insightfully perceiving something and then coming up with reasons why we see it and why we don't see it and all the rest of the stuff that goes with it. And they are basically protective in nature. So this question here is related to attempting to perceive, and it helps, dare I say this out loud, not to think you know anything. It improves a level of perception. Then, of course, reflexively, we tend to come up with a consideration of our personality based on what we're doing, which is what we're trained to do. But it's not helpful in relationship to actually growing inside as a process, because you terminate based on how you allow yourself to evaluate and devaluate both. It's like setting up boundaries so you don't move past something. And I know I've said this before, and I know how difficult it is to even understand it. I find it difficult even to try to explain it. So, and this is a precursor to what poor Chris was saying. That's not my question. And you're absolutely right, Chris. It's not your question, except that it is. In Jacob's orientation, he talks about the term structure of mind. This is very philosophical. But no offense, but I'm going to try and answer this in a manner that relates to some sense for me. And I would say, if you're really interested in reading something about David Hume and Immanuel Kant's works, Immanuel Kant is tough to read. It's back a few years, and so is David Hume's work. And some of his work is really interesting in relationship to the understanding of the human, of a human being, and how he or she functions. And I think he did quite an interesting job. And little sentences are in his work that, to me, seems to imply, if one could say that we read this stuff, that he had some awareness about the individual that he was, and he expressed these awarenesses in terms of others, which, by the way, is a very valuable thing, because then you begin to realize others are similar to us, not the same, just have some similarities, and therefore their vulnerabilities are in us as well, in slightly different ways. Anyway, regardless of that, the term structure of mind, and Chris says, I find myself thinking of the term structure of mind as a hard process as opposed to an intermediary link between higher beings and self. It may be neither, and I appreciate me talking about this a little bit. This structure of mind is a little bit confusing in a philosophical manner. So I'm going to relate to it the way I do. If you're reading this material, you may relate to it slightly different. You're certainly welcome to do that. People often talk about emotion and mind, and even how you function. I did this. I thought of that and I did this. That was part of my thinking. The structure of mind has a number of levels. And normally these levels are talked about primarily in relationship to the intellect. Yet, at the same time, you've heard me probably propose that emotionally we think more often than intellectually we think. Often that intellectual orientation is usually emotional thinking. And what do I mean by that? Good question. What I mean by that is that the relationship we have with how we express ourselves is related to an emotional bias, emotional mental bias, that is partly physical, experiential, is probably a better way to say it, based on how we've learned how to function, how we've been trained to think we should think, how we should understand things to be. It's the nature of our culture to express these things, and our culture is involved with everything from religion to philosophy, science, art, uh, anything you can think of related to how you functioned here in Canada or the United States, um, or England if you're from England, from Scotland if you're from Scotland, from Ireland if you're from Italy if you're from Italy, from France if you're from France. There is a cultural reflexive engagement that is cultivated within us all, and it naturally has an effect on us in terms of how we should be if we are fill in the blank. So and so living in this place and thinking this way or that. We also have those that think if somebody comes up with an idea, then it's automatically out for grabs, and we'll take that idea and try to find a counter for it. And so that it sounds intelligent, so we can be intelligent. This is all part of the human condition. There's no negation in this. This is what human beings often do because they're attempting to construct a structure within them, personalized for the purpose of being valued. And literally, that occurs in what you read and how you see the world and how you function. And there's no perfection in any one of them. Whatever you have learned and will ever learn, there is always something beyond that. That's within the structure of that which lies beyond the intellectual thing that you've already considered viable. The same is true for spirituality. I know when I say that, people get really frustrated with me from time to time because we have a bias about what should be considered valuable. In the world of energy, and which is a second part of this orientation here that Chris brought up, in the world of energy, there is a perception that relates to that. I'm going to try and bring these two together if I can. That which is perceivable by us. And that's a real can of worms sometimes. You perceive another if they happen, like I'm talking about thoughts that might be of significance or importance or not to people who are listening. So if you think and have a biased way of thinking relative to listening to others that you've learned from not only the culture, but your position and place in the world as a human being from your perspective, which will include biases related to how you think things should be. Yeah, all of us. Then you will naturally have a reflex already. You've been practicing this for a while, as all of us have. You will have a reflex, no matter what that reflex is, it will come out of that bias, out of that structure that's already constructed within you. The mind is a very, very interesting thing. In some people's world, that includes emotion. That includes the brain related to the physical form. The perception of that is a precursor to being able to perceive beyond that. Okay. In the structure of mind, that which you can perceive in you is related to how you function, how you think, how you respond to others. That's an aspect of mind considered by some. And you are then going to look at the structure of understanding of what you are perceiving. And that includes, who am I? What am I? Why am I? What is this brain, and how does it work, and why is it working this way, and why am I talking the way I talk, and why is she talking the way she talks, and why is he talking the way he talks? And that is the base structure of what is often considered mind. And then there's beliefs related to that. And that is another aspect, or a related but other aspect to the same thing. The structure of how one engages and considers the world to be, or doesn't consider the world after it's made up its mind. The world is like this. This goes on for a long period of time in us all. And then there's something else that starts to happen. You start to notice that you have these reflexes. You start to wonder whether you are trapped in them. No, one can say they're trapped in them. Yeah, well, everybody's trapped in that way. We're hooked by what we believe must be true. Natural. No negation involved here. Then we begin to notice that every now and then an idea expresses itself in this brain. And we might call that insightful. We might call it intuition. We might call it many things. All mean basically the same thing. You are in a normal biased engagement with the world, and suddenly you become conscious of an idea that you were not really considering. That might be slightly different than the one that you normally think of, or the way you normally think. That idea is a part of an engaging structure of what is called, in a broad way, mind. This concept of structure of mind really comes from Aristotle. And it's really built out of that based on the idea of we must have a way of engaging that makes some sense to us all, and that will seemingly never be fully completed by us, because different levels of consideration become viable. We even become inclusive of other people's thoughts, inclusive of materials that other people have written about. There was a minor influence because of Plato, because I'm sorry, not that I'm an extra special philosopher. I think these are just reading stuff and, junk like that, just to try and broaden my mind. That Plato was also related somewhat to concepts and thoughts that related to something similar to Socrates, wanted to make sense of things beyond the biases. Plato extended that into the world of universals, that he felt each individual was capable of moving into another abstract aspect of universals. Aristotle agreed, but spent most of his life trying to engage with and function in a step-by-step different way of coming up with things that would help us reconsider our biases, but also come up with ideas or words that express ideas so that we could have a fundamental method of engaging with the world. But they were still focused on who am I? What am I? Why am I that? What is a human being and why does it act like this or like that? Hume wrote a lot about this. Kant wrote some, most all philosophers wrote about both sides of this kind of a thing. And there's no sides. It's linked. An abstract mind moves in after this place within you that allows you to watch you and agree or not agree with you. Now, that's a weird thing. You can engage with others, speak, and change your mind within a second, because there has been a second, 1 second of a pause in your mind to watch or look at what you've said. Sometimes when you're emotional, at that coarser level of looking at what you do as valued or not valued or in the middle someplace, when you're emotional, it's hard to hold back because you become enthusiastic about a bias that might be okay, just doesn't want to broaden yet. Our whole looking at all of our engagement with our existence is the same way. Years ago, I remember reading an article on the sun, and a number of scientists said we have reached a point in astronomy where we know for sure everything about the sun. This is great for science. 2 years later, I'm not sure that exact date, just a short time later, they said, we have found out that there is something that the sun does that we didn't understand before. We thought we did. There's an idea beyond it, and we think it's this. This is revolutionary with respect to how stars function over long periods of time. Of course, that's astronomy, and that's the sun, and that's not related to our biases, but we have them nonetheless. Now, that's the structure of mind that keeps regurgitating all the time in philosophy. And of course, Jacob Needleman is not only a philosopher, but he's extremely interested in metaphysics, extremely interested in spiritual engagements that relate directly to humanity. And that's us, in case anybody didn't know. You and I, just simple human beings. That's what we are. And we don't like the word simple. We do like to express, especially when we're vulnerable, that we are something other than coarser level beings. It's okay to be coarser. It's okay to be coarser, meaning still learning. If you come to grips with being able to understand that no matter what you learn about mind or about anything else, you will still be learning. And there is space beyond what you know to go into a deeper level of understanding or perception than you begin to consider as viable at any stage of your development. This is true for me. This is true for you. This is true for everybody. It doesn't sound like it's going to give us a whole lot of credit one way or another, but it's not about credit. It's about learning and beginning to understand that there is something within us, though not cultivated well yet is involved with the process of movement towards engaging with an idea. And once again, ideas are words, explain ideas, that I'll talk a little bit more about on Saturday, because Lee Martin sent in a question related to enlightenment, and I'll try to tackle that one. That's a tough one. But the biases that we have will make it fairly simple for us. I won't make it simple, but I have a bias. Maybe that's where we'll find out that bias that I have, perhaps, may be uncomfortable for some, but it might be comforting to others. In this case, a structure of mind leads into levels that we have not engaged with yet. And this is part of the engagement that both Kant and Hume talked about, more Kant, I think. And they try to find other words other than the ones that are often used by most of us to explain things, but always moving in a direction that seemed to broaden out the idea of mind beyond the biased intellectual orientation that we seem to find comforting to us. And there is nothing wrong with that zone of comfort that we pick and be a part of. It is process. Being comfortable in one lane, suddenly ideas can move us into a broader lane, but you don't negate the previous lanes. Those understandings that you came through, whether you believe them now or not, are not to be thrown out as negative at all. They're just movements, kind of blended highways, moving to different kinds of highways, and leaving space for that possibility to occur. And this next question moves into a kind of little bit of that from Chris. She said, my experience while reading the book. Now, listen to this, please. This is important. In that there was experience. Not that we've talked about this before, but when a person has an experience, it's different than a theory. And then the experience has to be looked at as one thing, a beginning, which is very different than reaching some ultimate point. While reading the book, I became aware of the broadening of energy around my body. I had a similar experience when reading Sri Aurobindo. His books will do something similar. Other books will too, by the way. Different frequencies, still movement in there. Becoming aware they are actually transmitting. And it's the same with images or rocks that anyone has transmitted energy into will be emanating, oscillating. And sometimes in India, if you ever get to go there, you may notice some inanimate objects that have an emanation. The reason why you'll notice, is that you are cultivating an awareness of those things by some of these exercises that you're doing. And this is very valuable. Moves you into a different state. or perception of the world relative to what you're perceiving in mind. It's a mind state, emotional state, physical state. All three are part of these things. None are separate from another. We just talk that way. But they touch each other, they affect each other. So I had a similar experience when reading Sri Aurobindo. This time, I was not only aware of the energy, but became aware that I was observing myself. In the old traditions of philosophy, and I'm not saying everybody should read philosophy, that's for sure. God sometimes is really boring, and sometimes it's quite interesting, like every other subject. But within philosophy, if you follow a philosophical view, once again, Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, it comes all out of those areas, and they had teachers before these teachers too, in the old Greek classical traditions, and other areas in China, in India, in Persia. All of these systems had people who knew an inquiry into you provokes an ingestion of consideration, ideas, thoughts, that come to you and not only protect you, but are inquiring of a you. That is, you must observe something to inquire about it. So this concept of observation is an ancient concept, not only for spiritual engagement, but for philosophical, psychological engagement. Knowing a human being, or at least aspects of a human being within you, beyond what you protect to make you feel valuable and comfy, also shows you others, because in the scheme of things, all human beings have aspects of other human beings, even where you don't believe you have them. But this is an observational process. Jacob Needleman is an observer. Sri Aurobindo, an observer. Old ones like Hume and Kant and so many others, Aristotle, Plato, whatever. These subtleties of the mind allowing itself to perceive the emotional mind, the physical body, the reflexes, the responses that are constructed in us for the purpose of survival, are not to be thrown out, but not to necessarily be agreed with all the time. So this is the observing, goes on. Without judgment. This time I was only aware of the energy. I was not only aware of the energy, but became aware that I was observing myself while reading. That is transmitted. That's an aspect of mind. A willingness to go beyond what is considered to be normal by those who are not observing, or those who are observing, and even go beyond that. And there is an expression of flow relative to those chakras, an expression of capacity that is transmitted and can be observed by an individual who happens to be observing at the time that they're reading. My question is about the observer and the perception of it. I hope that helped a little bit. Something outside of myself. Our ability, we have an ability to watch ourselves while being in ourselves, as if we were just outside of ourselves, being interested in this human being, which is us, this form, which is us, and how it functions, and recognizing that if we know us a little bit better, we will understand others a little bit better. But we still have frustrations, we still have misunderstandings, we have all of these things. But this is part of a process of beginning to understand deeper and cultivating what is often called the philosophical mind without any definition being given. It means, are you okay with watching you without judging you and cultivating that aspect and watching and being fascinated and curious about the fact that others are similar? Very fascinating. And is the perception due to an increase in energy? In a kind of a way, it's a slightly different kind of energy. In a kind of a way, it's stimulating you in a manner that you can allow yourself, I'm talking to Chris now, of course not, no one else, allow yourself to be okay with you in that particular moment. That's all. Be okay with you in that particular moment. Who is this observer? It is you, an aspect of you. You can watch your body and what you do with it. You can watch your emotion, what you do with it. You can watch your mind and how you're responding to it. You can do these things. It's a bit like putting a focus on something and just allowing it to be and not caring what it does, but noticing what it does. And in fact, the trick in all of this is if you're looking and not caring what it does, your focus is off of you and onto watching. And that is really helpful. And be respectful of what you're seeing as a looker or observer or watcher, because you are looking to learn. You're not looking to judge, to understand, and be respectful to not only you, but every other human being. And you can learn to do that. It takes time. It's okay. Because and I'm not talking about taking time to learn this, how to do this. It does take time. I'm talking about it takes time not to be frustrated with yourself or elevated about the fact you can do it and all this sort of stuff that goes on in our natural, normal biases. Now, how do we stay open to what is being taught? You'll be in and out of it. Be okay with that. That's how learning occurs. You're in and out of understanding something. For those of you who think they understand something right away and never forget it, you're just missing something. No offense. It's just natural for us to do that because we have a natural reflexive bias about how we need to protect ourselves to maintain a sense of grounded comfort and value. We associate value of ourselves in a way by things, actions, how we function. And this is a new broadening of value. It was often called in the old traditions a different level of virtue, which meant you weren't judging anything. But that's a little bit hard for us because we're so practiced at doing something like that. But the reflex is so strong. It's a little bit deceptive, but the reflex is there. And softening down that reflex is not always the easiest thing in the world. It takes attention and being okay whether you pass or fail. Everybody passes, but not according to how you set things up inside your biases. And it's okay. That's what's shifting or could shift. The energy itself while reading, and then the energy and manifestation of the observer after reading. Yes, I think we talked about that. Is this the personality trying to get comfortable with the increase in energy? We have a dilemma. We define our ability to interact with the world from a subjective point of view. It's called personality. Just means a personal, interactive way of functioning. It's a form. We construct it and we call it something. We do that a lot. And that makes it easy for us to talk to each other. And though sometimes it doesn't, because many people have different definitions of what that form word means. So it's an aspect of what you can do that may be unknown to you. If you define personality as a system that is always biased and always acts the way you do, and this is something that is real, then it's a little harder for us to understand the idea of part of your personality, one could say, part of your mind, part of your emotional mind, even, or physical brain, is looking at and seeing something as if it's outside of you. And by the way, you can actually train yourself to watch you as if you are outside of you. We have so much flexibility, and we daren't use it. Because if you begin to use that flexibility of observation, it inhabits your way of seeing the world. And you're included in the world. So your way of seeing you. So you have to pull back from debasing the characterization of using energy that you call personality, because it's not there to be debased, not there to be thrown away. It's there to be broadened, because you need to be able to function as an individual, physically, emotionally, mentally, in your day-to-day. Sometimes, relatively speaking, you need to make a cup of tea. If you're not able to do that, coffee, whatever, then when you're thirsty, you'll be reaching for what? You'll have to bring your attention to what it is you're doing so that you can do it. Personality is not a negative thing. It's a form that is used and constructed and engaged with by you, and it is subject to shift. You can adjust that, because unless you think that your personality is the only you are, You are something. You have the ability to be the you that you believe you are, and to adjust that, to become a different kind of person, if you so choose to do that. It isn't easy to do, but you will still have remnants, strings that align with how you were before. And you will watch them come up, provided it's okay for you to watch them from your perspective. You don't disallow these things. You attempt to moderate them to some degree and understand that moderation continues purposefully so that you can understand the broadening of a relationship with existence that is different than the one that you have been told is the only one, or you might believe is the only one. But that movement lies within us all, and it's quite personally focused. It moves in certain ways for some people, different ways for others, because you grow through you. And there's no negation in that growing through you. Stereotypically, people like to define ways so that they can say that they're doing it the right way. But it doesn't, that's an intellectual thing. It's not an experiential thing. And you can have the cultivation of various experiences through the imagination as well. And you can force that. And when you do, that will follow the rules that you believe have to be true. It will do that because you're cultivating a kind of universe around you that relates to you being of value. Well, you always were of value. And you'll always be of value. Because there is a deeper level of engagement beyond us, but we don't forget how we got to it. Beyond the us that we've already cultivated. And I don't care what us that is. And everyone is talking about this, even Jacob Middleman. Okay. All right. She just asks for insight. I'm taking a look to see if I've forgotten anything. What I suggest, keep reading, keep engaging with things that seem to be significant, not only to yourself, but to others. Become curious about learning, but remember, the learning I'm talking about is not only reading or engaging with stuff so you can spit it back. It's engaging with the energy inside that is very much a part of experiencing the world differently than biases can experience it. There's another question I thought you asked, and maybe it was basically another question, Chris, and it related to the business of energy being stronger when a group meditates. I don't always think that that's true personally. What is stronger, though, is that the root centers, gonad centers, and solar plexus that link up through the coarser levels towards the top of the head, Kether, or the crown, and any links there will become stronger in a group. The subtlety of broadening out an understanding that's deeper, relating to unbiased territory. Doesn't often happen in those kinds of groups. So, and here's the reason why. Because the stimulation of the root gonad and solar plexus gets stronger. So the links can go up to the top of the head. But the subtlety of the top coming in and through the system is not always perceived. However, it has an effect on the three lower centers and other centers, heart, throat, crown. And these levels affect each other so that a perception can begin to be noticed that's different than related only to the root gonad and solar plexus. At first, those things are very important, in my opinion. But along with these things, energy from different levels through that abstract concept that we talk about is so-called abstract simply because the experiential level is not very high. That higher state energy influences the lower states to have momentary moments of not even noticing their own self-interest and how important they are. Just slowly helps. Slowly helps until you can consciously perceive that the expression occurring through you is not from you. This is very important. However, it's not something that we like that much simply because our basic focal point on these levels that we are in, our whole species in, relatively coarser than those levels I'm talking about. Those levels and the coarser levels like to own everything. I did this, I did this, I did this, I did it. And we're all a part of that. And this is where we are. Yet effects are occurring that may begin to shift and change that. But one may not want to shift or change that because it's more uncomfortable not to value yourself greater than another in a positive manner or in a negative manner. And this is when we're not understanding the operation of a continuum in almost every reflex that we have. Kind of raw, coarser, and then moving it slowly into the middle ground where it's softer. And you can see it's still there, but it's soft. And we blend. We're a blended being, composite being. We have many levels of engagement of which we are only aware of our natural, normal few. This is a wonderful question, Chris, and I much appreciate it. And I hope I helped you also, Jane, in relating to that looking inside part where we're just basically trying to be aware of how we function without negation. Oh, I do that. Oh, that's interesting. I never knew that. Oh, good. Okay, at least I know it now. At least I'm aware of it. That's a broadening, literally, of an awareness. And that is not to be just sloughed off. It's valuable. And that enables us to attend and to allow ourselves also to see the good parts in us. I wish you all a very good evening. What we're going to do is now meditate for roughly about 15 minutes to an hour. And I wish you all well, and I'll see many of you on Saturday. Please take care of yourselves. Now we'll just begin to do the balancing and grounding. Take care, everybody.